America First.
Can you believe it? They are saying that they don't agree with America First. How do you say that?
Magnificent.
You just can't say it, not on this show at least, which we named after that phrase, America First. Welcome back, dear friends. I'm Sebastian Gorka, former deputy to President Trump and host of this Salem radio show across the nation, live streaming on YouTube, available wherever you get your podcasts, and also our backup. Remember, YouTube does not respect the First Amendment, so make sure you subscribe for free to our Rumble account, our alternative First Amendment video account, which is rumble.com/SebGorka, SEBGORKA. We welcome back, as we do every week, one of your top favorites. He is, of course, senior fellow with the Hoover Institution, classics and military historian extraordinaire, Professor Victor Davis Hanson. Welcome back to America First.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sure you watched most of the key elements. For those who missed it, there was a Sino-U.S. summit on U.S. soil in Alaska. Perhaps the most important part of it all was this 18-second response from the leader of the communist delegation to our chief diplomat, Anthony Blinken. Video cut 3, play cut.
现在讲一句，你们没有资格在中国的面前说你们从实力的地位出发同中国谈话。
So let me say here that in front of the Chinese side, the United States does not have the qualification to say that it wants to speak to China from a position of strength.
From a position of strength. Lecture that you cannot talk to us from a position of strength. We were told, Professor Hanson, that America is back, American leadership is back, and this is less than 2 months into the new administration, and the largest communist dictatorship has said thanks, but no thanks. How does this affect the image that the Biden administration has been trying to portray?
Well, it doesn't look good because we have to remember that the Chinese are astute students of propaganda. They understand the American mind very well. So what they've done is take the entire woke culture and turned it on us in two different ways. When we admit that we're a racist society and we victimize people and we're going to have basically re-education in all of our institutions, the Chinese say, we agree, you are. And when we say that people who are not white are by nature and de facto victims, the Chinese say, that's what we've been trying to tell you. Your hatred of you is just because we're Asian, not because we've done anything wrong. So they've really upped the ante on the woke culture. They know it better than the people who created it.
He is the author of the new book. You can pre-order it now, The Dying Citizen, How Progressive Elites, Tribalism and Globalization Are Destroying the Idea of America. Professor Hanson, one of our callers so astutely in the first hour, one of our regular listeners, put it thusly, and I'd love your reaction. He said, it shouldn't surprise anybody that this Chinese communist delegation is throwing back the woke, the politically correct talking points of the left, of the Democrats, into the face of the Biden delegation, because they originated in communist countries like China and Russia. So basically what we've seen is a very effective transmission belt of decades of propaganda, starting in the Marxist hotbeds overseas, now internalized here, propagated by the Democrat Party in the last few decades, and now being sold back to them by the people they're trying to negotiate with. So nobody really in geopolitical terms should be surprised, should they?
Not at all. I mean, the French did the same thing with Foucault and Derrida and Lacan. They sent us our postmodernists, and then when that infected our universities, they got angry. But notice that they admit none of these charges are fact-based. What they're basically saying is, we don't think you're a racist society, or we wouldn't send 330,000 of our best students over and entrust them in your care. And we have over 1 million expatriates in your cities. And so we know privately, confidentially, you're not a racist society. But since there are no facts and you confess to something you're not guilty of, then we're going to go by no facts too. We are guilty of incarcerating 1 million people. and the Uyghur Muslims, and we're institutionalizing racism against our African students within our major cities. But because facts don't matter, we can say that we're liberal and you're racist, and that's what they've done. And
This is a stunning, in my opinion, this is a stunning realpolitik shock to the Biden system in less than 60 days in power. How does this bode for the next 3.5 years? Will we see nation after nation simply use the self-generated Achilles heel of the left against this new administration?
I think so. I think that Biden thought that in terms of the Biden administration, that once he came to power, they would cease all of this. Remember, all of a sudden, America was a great, wonderful place that had elected Barack Obama. But he's not an African-American charismatic figure. He's old Joe Biden from Scranton, who's being used. I thought he was being used by the left, but I'm not sure he's not out in front of the left, that he feel it's mutually exploiting each other. So Biden's not going to get an exemption just because he's on the left. I think that the people in our country and outside it are going to call him all sorts of names in his administration and his country. And there's no upside in what he's doing. You might remember during the whole aftermath of 9/11, Dr. Zawahiri and bin Laden, there was something called the Bin Laden Reader. And in that, they collected all of their writings. And one of the things they said is they attacked 9/11 because of climate change failures on our part and lack of campaign finance reform. I don't think they dreamed that up in the caves of Afghanistan. They got that from westernized Islamic people who tutored them on it.
Or Noam Chomsky.
Yeah.
In that case, is there a significant difference between this administration and the Obama administration, or is it just the different identities of the apex?
I think the difference is that Obama felt that we were a conservative country and that he had to have parameters on what the left could do for a while until he got elected. So between 2009 and 2012, he wasn't overtly the Obama that he became in the second term after he kind of lost the Senate and then later would lose the Senate and he lost the House. Biden doesn't care. I think he's either cognitively not up to it, or he doesn't want to take on the left, or he really believes that he's no longer the understudy of Barack Obama and he's going to be the most woke progressive president and be famous for that legacy. And that's what he's after. He doesn't care if they lose the House. He doesn't care if they don't win back the Senate. He doesn't care about being reelected. I think he just basically says, do something that's important and historical, and then they go out and do it. And he doesn't worry about the detail.
A president who wants the Oscar for being the wokest president of all. We're talking to Professor Victor Davis Hanson. Follow him right now at VD Hanson on Twitter. The new book, The Dying Citizen, pre-order it right now. And his new article we'll be discussing next. Who is our military's enemy? Professor Victor Davis Hanson on America First. Sadly, we're living under a Biden-Harris administration. What does it mean for your finances? More debt, more regulation, more money printing, less growth, and higher taxes. The importance of owning physical gold and silver has never been greater. Call the veteran-owned Midas Gold Group today to get their guide to owning bullion and coins. Call 480-360-3000 or go to MidasGoldGroup.com.
Portions of America First are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
I've never seen anything quite like that, Andrea, even behind closed doors with the Chinese, where meetings are usually quite scripted. I think there's a common thread between what we've seen with Russia and China, which is that those two countries got pretty accustomed in the last few years to the United States being essentially absent from holding up the international order, from speaking out on issues like human rights and democracy. And I think that both China and Russia wanted to test early on whether they could brush back the Biden team.
Yes, Trump was absent from the political arena for 4 years. Ask those 300 Russian mercenaries in Syria who are now dead, or ask, I don't know, Iran, ask China with regards to the trade war. But of course, Ben Rhodes, the only person to ever work in the White House who was refused even an interim clearance by the FBI, knows better. I'm Sebastian Gorka. This is America First. Car Firearms is fighting for America. Car executives stand with America First, willing to put their brand's reputation on the line to stand up for liberty. Please support our new Second Amendment Friday sponsor, Car Firearms. That's KAHR.com. We are back with Victor Davis Hanson, author of the upcoming book, available now. It has so many pre-orders, it's already hit #1. Go and order it today. It is The Dying Citizen, How Progressive Elites, Tribalism, and Globalization Are Destroying the Idea of America. Professor Hanson, your latest piece at American Greatness, amgreatness.com, is titled, Who is Our Military's Enemy? Right now, it seems to be a journalist on Fox News called Tucker Carlson, doesn't it?
It does seem so. I mean, he was singled out by the DOD website when it says Carlson smitten, and then John Kirby, the former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton's spokesman now at the DOD, said that the Secretary of Defense had nothing but revulsion, and then he compared Tucker to the Chinese Communist military. He said, we don't listen to critics like a cable news host or the Chinese military. So I hadn't seen that before, but it's indicative of the new woke military that the left feels can greenlight social activism without the messiness of a legislative debate or vote.
And surely wouldn't it have been more logical or justifiable, especially on DOD official Twitter accounts, not to lambast Tucker or compare him to the largest communist dictatorship in the world, but to address the points he was making about pregnant women or women in combat, or the President of the United States commenting in an address that everything's fine with the military because we've got new hairstyles for the female officers. Isn't that what the DOD should be doing?
Yeah, I thought so. In the column that I wrote for American Greatness, I said all you have to do is say that physical standards have not been lowered, and that women have the same physical abilities as men in forward combat units, or that the budget hasn't been swollen by social activist expenses, or former secretary or current Secretary of Defenses have not rotated in and out of defense corporate boards, contractor boards, any of that. So he made a lot of arguments. They could have said that's not true. There are no more federal troops in Washington right now than in Afghanistan's war zones, as Tucker Carlson said. But they didn't. They didn't address any of his points. They just smeared him. That's very unusual for a federal agency to go out and try to pick on somebody and use the whole apparatus of their agency to do so.
You wrote, with regards to higher education, one of my favorite works of yours, which is Who Killed Homer? The Demise of Classical Education and the Recovery of Greek Wisdom, where you kind of surveyed what's going on in the nation's colleges and the dearth of good book courses or classical education. Do we have a similar situation with the military? Are we going to have to wait for a new commander-in-chief and then some kind of ground-up reform of the PME, the professional military education system? What will it take to unwokify the American military, Professor?
I'm very worried. I don't know if we can. I think from Major on up, there are hundreds of, you saw the Vindman brothers' role in the Ukrainian impeachment. There are so many lieutenant colonels, and then 1 to 4 stars that rotate in and out of the beltway agencies, White House, Congress, National Security Council, that they navigate the contours of the military-industrial complex. They understand it, they master the bureaucracy, and they feel that their promotions are going to be green-lighted to the degree that they're woke, and they're going to be retarded or stopped to the degree they're not, and they make the necessary adjustments. And then in addition to that, they eye lucrative retirements where they want to retire and then lend their knowledge of the inner workings of the Pentagon to, Lockheed or Raytheon or Northrop Grumman or whomever it is. And that's what I think it's a weird combination of corporatism and wokeism and you think they would be antithetical, but they're part of the new cultural landscape for our top-ranking brass.
And if you need any evidence of that, just have a look at what big tech is doing in terms of cultural censorship. The book I mentioned is Who Killed Homer, co-authored by our regular guest, Professor Victor Davis Hanson at VD Hanson on Twitter. But the new book you have to order now is The Dying Citizen, How Progressive Elites, Tribalism, and Globalization Are Destroying the Idea of America. Thank you, Professor. Have a blessed weekend. This is America First on the Salem Radio Network, coming to you from the ReliefFactor.com studio.